What is the 2026 dream recruiting class?
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? And welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 6th year covering UofL, 4th year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. We are conducting another weekly mailbag on today's show. 8 questions that I will answer. 2 in the first segment, 3 in the second and third segments, respectively. We'll discuss what the dream class could look like for the Louisville Cardinals in the 2026 men's basketball recruiting cycle. We will discuss Rick Pitino's comments, Vangelis Zougris' injury. We'll also discuss whether or not this notion that the success on the defensive side of the ball will determine how good Louisville is for the overall season, whether or not that's overblown or not. So a lot of great questions today. First, today's episode of the show brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. All right, so diving into the questions, we'll start out in the men's basketball realm. What does the dream class look like for the Louisville Cardinals in the 2026 recruiting cycle with Tyran Stokes? And what does it look like without Tyran Stokes? There's also a note at the bottom of the question. Please be realistic as possible. Okay, glad that we made that point, because truthfully, we're starting to see how certain recruitments are filling out, right? Like players that Louisville seemed like they were really involved with back in June. Well, things have cooled off, right? Jordan Smith cut his list and Louisville was not included in that. It feels like the Deron Rippey Jr. sweepstakes is probably not one that's going to end up in the Derby City. Haven't heard much about Louisville with Dylan Mingo. I think there's a visit with Ikenna Elozi, but still we have to see. So I think that, of course, with Stokes, I think it's also kind of funny because a dream class kind of automatically includes Tyran Stokes. So if he's not involved or included in the class, like how can it really be a dream class? But anyways, we will, kind of follow the guidelines here. Tyran Stokes, of course, is in the class. Joining him, I've got Taylen Kinney. Of course, he's been sort of that 1A, 1B prospect on the priority list, 5-star point guard, 5-star combo guard, whatever you want to classify him as. He's definitely included in the mix. And with Stokes and Kinney in the fold, I think the resources that you're willing to spend on the remainder of the class are, I won't say depleted, but they're definitely limited. So I think that you probably add one of Colben Landrew or Anthony Felici. Landrew, 4-star small forward from Marietta, Georgia. Felici, player that we just talked about on Monday, 4-star small forward from Hurricane, Utah. Solid, maybe not one and done type players, but 2 and done, multiple year level guys, which I think adds to the continuity of the roster. And then I will say insert international prospect here. That's something that Pat Kelsey has prioritized a ton, and bringing in an international player that can be a multiple year, like either a stash and develop or play multiple seasons, or even a one and done. Who knows? That would make a lot of sense. So it's a 4-man recruiting class there, assuming that he doesn't come to Louisville. Like, let's play that hypothetical, because the question did ask, what does a dream class look like without Tyran Stokes? I think that it's somewhat similar. I think that you keep Taylen Kinney, of course. You keep the international prospect. I'm going to say you add both Landrew and Felici because you have the budget to do so. I think Landrew when it's all said and done, could be a top 25 5-star guy, maybe even a one and done. Landrew and Felici play two different types or two different styles, two different roles. So even though they're listed at small forwards, I think that there's some versatility there to coexist on the court at the same time. So you've got 4 players: Kinney, Landrew, Felici, and an international prospect. I'm also going to add Arifon Dian, the number 1 center in the class, according to 247sports.com. 7'1", plays at Iowa United Prep, a guy that is just beginning to scratch the surface of the potential in the middle. So doesn't seem like Louisville's really involved with, or seriously involved with, other top forwards at the moment. Guard play outside of Kinney, it's like, who else would you go with realistically? Maybe Ikenna Alozie. Maybe you do potentially look at a guy like Dylan Mingo, but I'm going to go with the center here. Give Louisville a really solid front court option and then address the backcourt and, the wing spot with the rest of the transfer portal and returning guys. So only difference is if you take Stokes out, I'm going to include both of Landrew and Felici, and then I'll add Arifon Dian as well. So those are my quote-unquote realistic dream classes for the 2026 cycle. Both of them would be really good hauls for the Cardinals, and I think that that's pretty realistic. What are your thoughts on the comments from Rick Pitino? Okay, so if you don't know, Rick Pitino went on John Rothstein's podcast, or I think it was earlier in the week, but it got put out there earlier in the week. And John Rothstein asked Pitino about whether or not he would come back to Louisville. And he said, me personally or my team? And Rothstein goes, well, both. And Pitino really didn't answer it from a team perspective, but he said that, there's some things that the former board of trustees did that he won't be able to ever forgive. And it's not something about how he got fired, but how they fired Tom Jurich. Well, he made a point of emphasis to explain that he's not going to hold that against the current administration, especially after they honor Tom Jurich, naming the road right out in front of the Kuber Center Tom Jurich Way, and paying homage to him. And it feels like that's what Rick Pitino wanted all along, was for Louisville to be able to recognize what their former athletic director did. And they did that, and wow, all of a sudden Rick Pitino was like, yeah, I would go back in a New York minute. And of course he seems like he's on sort of that, or the beginning of the farewell tour, right? Made his amends with the Kentucky fans. Seems like he's going to make his amends with the Louisville fans. And I mean, the comments, it's nice to hear. I feel like it's kind of just like closure in this long, dark chapter of Louisville sports. I feel like there's two groups. There's one that just cannot stand Pitino, can't stand the state of the program that he created. And then there's another portion that, huge. They would take Rick Pitino back today if they could. There's a lot of love for Rick Pitino. I think that my stance is sort of right there in the middle. Like, I'm not okay with what he did. And he did mention that even if he didn't know, a captain is responsible for his crew. And he mentioned, he's like, I have to take responsibility for the assistant coaches and what they did. And I respect that. And overall, I mean, I grew up with Rick Pitino basketball, right? That's all I ever know, or that's all I ever knew at that point. I wasn't alive for the Denny Crum era. And if I was very, very young. I was born in 1998. So Pitino took over in 2001, and my first memories of Louisville basketball were that 2004 season. And it was just overall a tough thing to deal with, right? I'm glad that it seems like things are getting smoothed over. Like, I will always love Rick Pitino, but even though I love what he did for the most part and appreciate that, especially as it relates to my childhood, I am extremely excited about where the future of this program is going under the leadership and guidance of Pat Kelsey. So I think that two things can be true at one time. I think that you can appreciate the good times with Rick Pitino, like you can appreciate the good times with Denny Crum, but also be extremely excited about what's to come for this program, because I think that they hired the right guy with Pat Kelsey to be able to lead this program to those heights that were once achieved pretty regularly. So when we come back, we'll discuss Vangelis Zougris' injury. We'll talk a little bit about revenue sharing and more. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you right back here in just a moment on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. Whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long-shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before Week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. I'm going to say that my MVP, it's Lamar Jackson. He's going to get his third award, and I'm going to crown my champion in August. And I'll be honest, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Card Nation, as always, I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We are getting closer and closer to that 5,000 subscriber mark, so everything is appreciated. Okay, so 3 questions on this segment. We'll have a men's basketball one, an overall athletics one, and a football one. The first one is, what is the update on Vangelis Zougris' injury situation? So for those that didn't see, there was a clip that surfaced, I'd say about a week ago, where Vangelis Zougris was hobbling off the court playing for his country over in Europe, hobbling off the court. Video clip would show that what looks like an ankle sprain, and that's kind of what it's been diagnosed as. We haven't heard much after that, which I don't know if it's good or not, honestly. I would say that it's good that you're not hearing more about it. But as someone who's legitimately, I kid you not, I'm personally dealing with a high ankle sprain, and it's miserable because, was training for a marathon and ultimately just kind of, going from running every day to not running every day, just more of a mental jump for me. But it's just, there's a lot of swelling, a lot of discomfort, pain, bruising. Like a mild sprain, about 1 to 3 weeks, according to WebMD. Moderate sprains, grade 2, about 3 to 6 weeks. Severe sprains could require surgery, but usually could be like a several month recovery. So depending on the severity of the injury, and of course, this is all speculation, the hope is that he's going to be back, well ahead of time before those fall practices start. But I really don't think we know at the moment. Ankle sprains can be weird. Suffered it during the first full week of August, so not sure what the timeline is going to look like, but he does have about 3 months from when he got injured to the beginning of the season, so he's going to have ample time to recover. So hopefully it's not too serious. With the new article from the Courier-Journal coming out about Josh Hurd sitting down and discussing where the revenue sharing of $20.5 million was going to go to, what is your reaction to the sports included? So basically, Josh Hurd sat down and said, these are the 5 sports that are going to be getting the money from the $20.5 million revenue sharing. It's football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and volleyball. So my reaction to it is that it's expected for me. It is not really a shock that the revenue sports, like the sports that are bringing in the revenue for the university, are getting compensated on the other end. Like, of course, football brings in the money. Men's basketball, women's basketball is big here at Louisville. And then you have baseball and volleyball. I'm glad that baseball and volleyball got included into the mix. But these 5 sports are the 5 sports that I sort of had circled as the ones that probably were going to get revenue sharing. But the other part of my reaction is that it sucks because with how this new era of college sports is being welcomed in, and I'm all for players getting compensated for the money that they bring in for the university. The downside is that the revenue sharing sports, or I'm sorry, the non-revenue sports aren't really getting much of that. Now, I don't know if outside of the revenue sharing, like how much of the NIL is going to go to those sports, but I mean, there's a good amount of sports across the country that are being cut from the budget. Like sports are being taken away from certain schools. Like they're canceling teams in sports, and it's sad for the state of college athletics, and that's sort of the huge downside to what this is turning into in terms of the college sports model, because I mean, you're losing sports at many schools out there, and it's not something that's going to sort of correct itself. I think it's probably going to get considerably worse before it gets better. So it's expected, or at least I was expecting that, the 5 sports that are getting revenue sharing would get revenue sharing, but it also makes me a little sad because I support this athletics department as a whole. I go to soccer games. I go to a bunch of other sports games because I'm a huge fan of the University of Louisville. And of course I do PA announcing, and a lot of the announcing is for those non-revenue sports. So, I mean, it sucks. Put it that way. It just sucks. Final question of the segment is regarding the football team. Do you think the level of play or success on defense, or do you think that the notion, sorry, I read that wrong. Do you think that the notion that the overall success / level of play on defense will determine the season in 2025 is getting a little overblown? I don't at all. I will be very firm in this. I think that the quote unquote overreactions are really just loud concerns. Like they're being labeled overreactions because you're hearing about them a lot. Louisville's offense was top 15 last year. The offense didn't lose the game against Stanford. The offense didn't lose the game against Miami. For the most part, the offense didn't lose the game against SMU. Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, yeah, I'd say that the offense was the main reason, but 3 of the 4 losses were mainly on the defense. Now, of course, it's a team game, and the offense wasn't perfect in any of those other 3 games, but it's pretty clear that with a top 15 offense and you lose 4 games, your defense is mostly to blame there. So you're going to have a really good offense. Again, I made a point to a friend of mine in a group chat, that I am kind of going back and forth on this, and it would not surprise me if this is the most talented offense Jeff Brom has ever had and will ever have. You've got a really good quarterback. You have a top 3 running back in college football. You have a backup running back who's a top 5 running back in the conference. You have great receivers. You have a formidable, solid offensive line, and you've got pretty solid tight ends. Like, this offense is stacked. I imagine that they're, again, going to be a top 15 unit. So, no, I don't think it's overblown at all, because the defense is going to be sort of that X factor. If this defense can be, all I'm asking for is serviceable. Like, I'm not saying they have to be top 25 in the country, but better than they were last year. Serviceable, more effective in defending mobile quarterbacks, limiting the big plays that they give up, getting off the field on 3rd down, completing the pass rush. There's these aspects that kind of combine into the overall point that I'm trying to make here, is that if Louisville's defense improves, they are very much a college football playoff contender. If the defense continues to be a liability like it was for the most part last year, it's going to be really challenging. You saw teams with great offenses last year fall short of the playoff. Miami, Louisville, just to name a couple examples. Who knows? If Louisville's defense is better in that game early on against SMU. If they're better against Stanford and the team is sitting at 10-2 with losses to Miami and Notre Dame, like how does that change the picture? Or maybe you don't allow as many points as you did to Miami. Anyways, I don't think so. I don't think that the concern on the defensive side is getting overblown. So when we come back, we have 3 more football questions. Is James Madison a team that we are sort of overlooking too much? I'm not going to tell you what I think. Well, I am, but we'll wait a second. First, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. Card Nation, Wayfair is one of those companies that as summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine you love. And it's a company that makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding and linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop for your home. I recently grabbed some new bedding from Wayfair, and it's been the perfect addition to my home because my dogs, I guess, didn't really get the memo that you're not supposed to try to dig a hole all the way through the bed, and thus had to go to Wayfair. But they came in super, super clutch with meeting all of my needs. Get organized, refreshed, and back to routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to head and shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. This will be the final episode of the week. I know I mentioned this early on. I wanted to once again remind you all that only 4 episodes this week. We will be back on Monday. And when we do come back, we are going to be less than 2 weeks away from Louisville kicking off the season. And 3 weeks away from Louisville taking on James Madison. And James Madison is a team that many have sort of been disagreeing on. And one of the questions in this segment is, are we overlooking James Madison too much? I think you either think that James Madison has a legitimate chance to beat Louisville even when the Cardinals are playing good, or you think that they stand no chance. I think I'm right there in the middle. I think that if Louisville handles business, they're going to be fine. But James Madison is a preseason top 40 team. They're going to be maybe the favorite to win the Sun Belt, and maybe one of those like non-Power 4 teams that could throw a wrench in the playoff. Who knows? But James Madison, for me, the reason why I'm not concerned I have some level of concern, but why I'm not freaking out over the game, why I don't think we're overlooking James Madison too much is because I feel like the Cardinals are going to be ready for that game week 2. It was sort of the same thing with Jacksonville State. It's like, oh, well, it could be upset alert. Yeah, if Louisville doesn't play well, Louisville blew Jacksonville State out, and I think that if they play the same ability, they're going to be able to do the same with James Madison. James Madison, they are a team that doesn't turn the ball over a ton. They like to run the football a lot. That's when they win a ton of games, is when they do great on the ground, and Louisville is a really good run defending team. George Pettaway is back for the Dukes. He's going to be really solid. Quarterbacks is going to be a question. Is Alonzo Barnett going to be available post-injury? Is it going to be UNLV transfer Matthew Sluka, who I'm not even really a huge fan of, or is it going to be Camden Coleman from Richmond? Regardless, I think if Louisville's going to be able to handle the line of scrimmage, and it's an offensive line that's pretty decent, but there's just no depth of it there for the Dukes. With no depth, I think Louisville's going to be able to tire them out and be able to set the tone for this offense. Wide receiving core is, they're just replacing everyone. So there's some additions via the portal, but still I think James Madison on offense is, well, I think that there are some question marks. The defense was really good. Led the Sun Belt in total defense, scoring defense. They stopped the run. Are they going to be able to stop Isaac Brown and Duke Watson? I really don't think so. I think that Emmanuel Bush is a really good threat to trying to stop that run, and they've got a solid linebacking core with Trent Hendrick and a couple of other players. But it's a 4-2-5 defense, and even though they have some veterans, I think that Louisville's just going to be able to get their big-time plays. So, no, I don't think that we're overlooking James Madison too much. Predict the record for this 4-game pod. Virginia Tech, Miami, Clemson, SMU. I think the record is going to be 2-2. I think, and that could very well be the 2 losses that Louisville sustains, and they end up going 10-2 for the season because these are the toughest 4 games, right? I think that Louisville will beat Virginia Tech. I think that they're going to be able to take down the Hokies in Lane Stadium, even though it's the toughest environment that they'll play in the regular season. I think they're going to beat Virginia Tech. And I think they'll beat one of Miami or SMU. I'm going to say that they beat Miami. I think that Miami is the one team in the ACC that is most likely to disappoint based upon where they are projected to finish. At least that's my opinion. I think that the losses to Clemson and at SMU. So I'm going to go 2-2 for the predicted record here. Final question is, will there be more parity at the top of the ACC? Now, I could be wrong here, but the question kind of confuses me a little bit. This is the way that I interpreted it, is will the top 2 teams still be the top 2 teams here in 4 months? Like, will it be Clemson and Miami, or will it be Clemson and SMU? Like, will the 4 teams, Louisville, Clemson, SMU, Miami, be the top 4 teams? I feel like Clemson's going to be the shoe-in for the top spot. Clemson's really good. They've bounced back. This is going to be one of their normal years. Last year, yeah, you beat them in Death Valley Junior. But still, they're much improved. The younger guys that they had playing a ton of snaps, they are back. They are older. They have a really good defensive front. Cade Klubnik is going to be a Heisman dark horse candidate. Clemson's going to be good. I think Louisville and SMU are going to be really good. Miami is one of those teams, like, yeah, they have a lot of talent, but they have a lot of talent every year. And outside of last year, which had a generational offense led by the number 1 draft pick, Mario Cristobal consistently does less with more. And even last year, he couldn't take the number 1 offense in college football to the playoff because the defense was that bad, despite there being so many solid defenders. So, I mean, I think that I don't know about a ton of parity at the top. I think that the middle ranks, like the 4 through 9, could be pretty interesting because I could definitely see Georgia Tech being in the top 4. I could see, like, there's a couple teams: Florida State, Duke, Carolina, Pittsburgh. Those 4 teams. NC State is a 5th that you just kind of don't really understand what you can expect. Syracuse is a team that last year had a really easy schedule. Are they going to be able to bounce back, or are they going to fall off a cliff? I mean, I think that there's reasonable parity, but I don't think that this is going to be something to where you have Clemson, Miami, SMU, and Louisville. I think that there's no chance that the ACC championship game will feature 2 teams not in that group. Put it that way. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the show and this week's editions. We'll be back on Monday. Everyone have a great day, great weekend. We'll see you back here coming up soon. Go Cards.